Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, February 6th. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's see, we got a really exciting show today. As you know, the prompt is for this week on the Rattlecast. It's going to be to write a traditional formal sonnet of one of the various types. And I thought we would look at some scansion in particular and try to get those that formal meter going. And so we're going to do that in just a little bit, and then we'll take, we asked anybody if you submitted anything for today in particular. Leslie Ann Skechterson did. She put sonnet there in the submission line. Winston Munn sent something too. If there's sonnets, we'll look at his. If you want, let's see. No, Winston's are not sonnets. I think we only have one sonnet anybody sent in. But if you want to submit a sonnet right now to be looked at for Critique of the Week, feel free. We'll scan some sonnets today. And I have some other ones to look at too. But first, let's see, who's here on board with us on this wonderful journey? Let's see, Nancy Sabanek is here, Winston Munn, and Leslie Ann Skechterson. Great to see you both. I just mentioned, and you're right at the top. Lynn Schilling is here. MF Alderman from Northeast Georgia. Good to see you, MF. Nancy Tennell is here. Steve Horrell. Patty Arbor. Sean Evidingo Sanders. Brian O'Sullivan is here. Lori Flanagan. Holly York. Faye Esralla. Jamie Thomas is here. Susan Spear. Christina Nueven. Hemet Malik all the way down on there. Good to see you, Hemet. Mary Keating is here. Happy Friday to you, too. Let's see, Michael Ketchum, Christine Fulton. So we got a great... Chelsea McClellan is here, too. Chelsea, I've heard and seen a little bit, is really great at scanning and breaking down meters. So she's going to be a real asset as we talk about that during this episode, too, I'm sure. Let's see. I look a little... Not to be vain, but I look a little washed out. I think I got to adjust my camera settings a little bit. Oops, that's not right. This one. Well, I guess it's not that bad. A little more, we need a little more contrast though. It's a little bit weird. Okay. Anyway, let's see. So we're going to take a look at scansion and how to break down the meter of poems is what we're looking at today. And I thought I'd start out just, we'll do a few of what we have published and a couple other poems and as examples of how to do it. So you can learn how to look at your own poems that way, how to break things down, and try to write poems in actual traditional formal verse. You hear a lot of the times I say, I would love more formal poetry submissions. We do, I try to publish as much as I can. We don't get all that much. In a similar way to haiku. We love haiku. We don't get that many haiku submissions, And so it's something good to know. I think it makes for great poetry. And let's take a look in more detail. And we'll answer any questions you have. And if you put, as Katie Doder says, send in your sonnets, please. Yeah, if you want to submit any, I'll refresh the page. Submit them right now. Submit your sonnet, and we'll take a look at how it scans. But we have a couple to start with. So anyway, let's look at this first poem. And it took a little bit extra. I had to get this document camera set up. I don't use it much. And here you go. So this is, I thought we'd start out with a really easy one. This is Rhina Espaillat, and she was, of course, attempted to be the guest on Monday. She was really trying to get in. I don't know what was happening with the Zoom, but it wasn't working. But, yeah. Abigail Cargo says, why do you guys think formal poetry has gotten less popular? Do people assume it's antiquated? To me, I think it's because it's more work, to be honest. And I think people, we were talking about this just the other night, like, why is Rhina not one of the big poets that academia loves? I mean, she's a wonderful person from the Dominican Republic, does all these translations, beautiful, beautiful poetry. And yet she's like beloved in her formal community, but not one of the poets that, I mean, she should be a U.S. Poet Laureate. Like, she's perfect for that. Like, why did that never happen? And it's because academia runs the ship, and academia doesn't like traditional verse, I think, because they don't like teaching. But anyway, that's something for another day. But let's just take a look at scanning this. And I thought we'd start with a really easy one. This is in a trimeter. And so it's really easy to feel and experience this. I learned how to scan poems from Robert Mezzi. And even as I say, that academia doesn't like formal poetry, I learned how to scan poems in an MFA program. It was the only professor. I took a whole poetry thing as a grad student, a whole thing as an undergrad, and only had one professor that that taught or cared about scansion. Everybody else thought that formal verse was antiquated or old-fashioned or didn't want to deal with it, and it's just a shame, I think, yeah, as academic. Well, Brian, if you have a different opinion about that, I'd love to hear your opinion on that too. Why do you think formal poetry is less popular? Yeah, Chelsea wants her take too. Yeah, feel free to put it in the chat. Anyway, let's take a look at this. It's trimeter, which makes it really easy to hear. And what Robert Mezzi told me to do, you heard on the both on the Rattlecast and issue number 80 maybe, or 86, 82 of Rattle. But Annie Finch was the poet there, and she uses this wand and cup, which I've never really exactly understood. But she's got like a little line and a little U, which you'll see a lot too. But she calls it the wand and the cup. However you want to do it. How I always thought it was just a little dot for the unstressed and a little slash for the stressed. And so this is really easy to hear. And the first thing I want you to do is just listen to the poem and maybe watch. Let's see. What's the best way to do this? Watch as you can kind of conduct a poem. And if you watch someone who really reads and gets into their poetry, lets the body speak, and that magical music of it being a dance, you can feel that rhythm. There's a rhythm to it. There's a sway to it. There's a dance to it. And you can actually conduct a poem. So let's start like this. Ready? Here's a hand. We'll go like this. The sharpened shears he plied hang useless on the wall. Now that he's gone away, almost as if they sense and mourn the difference. The shrubs he used to trim have swelled, shapeless and dense. The weeds he kept at bay, creeper, tendril, and limb, run rampant through the fence. But no, tools don't recall the gardener who died, and these green things don't care. No thing remembers him, how difficult to bear. So that's how we naturally access language in English. English is a stress-based language, and we group sound units around the stress. Other languages, like Romance languages, French in particular, a syllabic language, Arabic, a syllabic language, Japanese, a Moraic language, doing it totally differently based on the timing. But there's ways that we group sounds together to comprehend language. And we do it around stresses. So stresses are kind of like, you might want to think of it like as the moon or the star that the planets are orbiting around, And so every sort of, and maybe a better, I think of it as a planet. The stress is the planet. And then it's got like moons. Some planets have one moon, one unstressed syllable. Other planets have multiple moons. But the moons are sort of swirling around the planet of the stressed syllable. Okay? And that's really how language is structured in English, where it's a stress-based language. So we generally have a regular rhythm to the stresses, and that's what stands out. And when we can talk, if you watch somebody giving a speech, that's where the little famous, I'm not pointing, I'm not fisting, I'm doing this little holding a pen that the politicians do because they want to be aggressive but not too aggressive, whatever. If you watch that, they point with this thing with their on the stresses of their speech too. I promise you I am not a crook or whatever, That's what they do. That's what the stresses are. And so anyway, let's take a look now. I'll do the same thing, but read the poem right here. Okay. Ready? I'll do this. My hand again. Hand up here. Ready? The sharpened shears he plied hang useless on the wall. Now that he's gone away, almost as if they sense and mourn the difference. I guess I can do this. The shrubs he used to trim have swelled, shapeless and dense, and weeds he kept at bay, creeper, tendril, and limb, run rampant through the fence. But no, tools don't recall the gardener who died, and these green things don't care. Nothing remembers him, how difficult to bear. Okay? And so we can scan it out like this. So I got my unstressed, stressed. Okay. The sharpened shears he plied. 1, 2, 3. 3 beats per line in this. It's trimeter. Okay. Hang useless on the wall. I mean, it's very straightforward. You don't really need to know. To me, the thing that matters is not really all the names for everything. It's so easy to get bogged down with names. I can't remember the names of all the feet, which one's a coriam, which one's a trochee. I kind of get a few words, but I forget a whole bunch of words. But what you really need to know is we're establishing a pattern, and what really matters is that each line has the same number of stresses while you naturally speak it, and that there's a general consistency to the type of foot that you're using. And here it is short long, which is the I am, and most of the most poetry, because it's a really natural way to speak in English. Although again, Annie Finch disagrees with it. She thinks that there's a different reason why it's become the standard one. But the I am is the most common. What you'll see in iambic pentameter, which is what sonnets are written in, means there's 5 of these beats. But you don't want to have them exactly perfectly identical all the time. You mix them up and change and move around and have a little variation, because our brains are pattern recognition machines. Our fundamental thing we do, and why we've built all of civilization, is called is because we like to recognize patterns and then test our patterns and see, and then adjust our patterns as we find some flaw in the model that we've built of the world. And that's really how everything is made. And so we get a little hit of dopamine. We get a little happiness when we get to update our model. And so we notice this pattern, and then we get to add a little extra, and we notice the little distinction and how it's a little bit different. And that's why people love classical music. Yeah, and so you want to have variety. And there's sort of an 80-20 rule. You need enough. There's some sort of sweet spot in every poem where you have enough regularity, and then you have a little bit of variation to keep it interesting. Because otherwise, as Sean Ann Venningo Sanders says, it becomes sing-songy if it's just the same rhythm over and over again. It's like a nursery rhyme, and that gets really boring really fast to your ear. It's that sense of learning and adjusting that's really exciting in what is the music of language. So what you want to look at is that there are equal numbers of stresses, and there's some kind of pattern that's a base to play off of. And then where the pattern changes a little bit, you want it to be a place that's like highlighted in a certain way, because that draws your attention a little more. You get into the rhythm, and then a little bit of variation highlights that bit of verse. And so that stands out a little more. And so you want that something to be something that should stand out. And that's just the basic thing of how to write in form. You don't need to know the words, the rules. All you need to know is have a regular pattern, have the same number of stresses per line, and only varied a little bit, only varied enough to keep it interesting, but not enough to make it unrecognizable. Anyway, let's keep going. The sharpened shears he plied hang useless on the wall, now that he's gone away. And so here's the first variation. To me, this is stressed. This is unstressed. Now that he's gone away. And again, technically, that's a trochee, but you don't need to know that. It's just inverted. The stress comes before, and that adds an emphasis, and it's a perfect place to add emphasis because now is something you want to emphasize in the poem. Do you notice how that works? The sharpened shears he plied hang useless on the wall now that he's gone away. Okay? Let's see. I'm just trying to read some comments too. Okay, anyway, let's keep going. Almost as if they sense and mourn the difference. Yeah, it's very straightforward meter for this poem, and trimeter is really easy to see and hear. That's why I wanted to start out with that. And I don't know. Let's see what other variations she has. The shrubs he used to trim have swelled, shapeless and dense. So then we get a shapeless. Stands out as another inverted trochee there. And again, if you count, I say it's an 80-20 rule. You can actually count. And here there's 6, and one of the 6 is is varied. That's That's enough to notice the pattern and enough to notice the variations in the pattern. And that's what's pleasing. That's right in that sweet spot. And weeds he kept at bay. Creeper. And here we get another inverted one. Tendril and limb. So here we have two trochees in my reading of it. Another thing you have to, it really, I think you have to focus on too, is or highlight or mention, is that everybody reads things a little differently too. There's a lot of variation even within how you would read and scan a poem. There are a lot of things, there are a lot of stresses. It's not just like a yes or no. It's not just a yum yuck or a black and white and on and off, that the stress is not. There's a little bit of, there's some words that sort of hang in the middle in the way we say them. And then those can be used depending on the context, either as a stressed or an unstressed, depending on how it fits in. And everybody has a different accent, a different way of saying things based on, all the people, all the language swirling around them. And so scanning a poem, people will scan a poem slightly different. And that's another tricky part about poems. Jenny Middleton says, how are submissions sent now? I mean, for a live critique like this one. All the submissions on Critique of the Week go to rattle.com, Critique of the Week up in the menu bar. You will find the submission portal to Submittable, and you submit your poems there. Yeah. Okay, well, let's continue. Run rampant through the fence. Another straightforward iambic line there. And here, this is one of those, I was talking about the in-betweeners, but no, I think you could, to me, I still say but no, but see how the but no is the but is a little bit higher, a little bit more stressed in the way we say it than, another unstressed line might be. And I think it's one of the things that maybe throws people off, is that just thinking that it's really clear and it's not clear to me, so I don't understand it. There's ambiguity. There's like stretching. It's finding, our speech is analog, and then we're digitizing it when we do this kind of thing. Okay, and so that's why you can hear it a little bit differently. It's a wave that we're turning into discrete units, and the but is a little bit more stressed, and similar to up here we had the now. We emphasize that we were starting out a new thing. It's common to start out with a trochee to sort of have a little more power and force in the speech. So here, but I still read the no as more emphatic. And so, but no, and especially because of the comma. I think that's maybe what Susan Spear is saying here. But no, tools don't recall. And that's how I would read that. But no, tools don't recall. But again, there's different ways you could read this. Yeah. Hamid Malik says the role of the comma is interesting. It stops you and does change the way you emphasize. And that's why commas are really important in poetry. And that's why I think every poet should understand language at this level. And not the names for everything, but just how the poem is flowing in that dance in the mouth. Anyway, the guard, Deneur, who died, again, straight iambic. And these green things don't care. No thing remembers him. How difficult to bear. All right. So again, we close out with iambic, and you'll see Rhina do this a lot. The variation usually is sort of like we get some variation toward the end of the poem, and then we sort of downshift sort of into that smooth back into it for the sort of the crucial line, which is most heartfelt, which you'll see that a lot. And then the opposite can be true sometimes, where you shift at the very end into some kind of variation. But it's a very simple poem to scan. Oh, the other thing too that we do, which I kind of forgot about, is you can break up these like you would a musical measure. So the shar, pencheers, since it's, once you establish that it's iambic, that there's two syllables and unstressed and then stressed in most lines, you can break it into units of sound like this. Hang use, this on the wall. So you have 3 units here. Now that he's gone away, and that helps you see what's going on too. Okay. Yeah. Now let's take a look at, I think the next one I had is another Rhina poem, because this one's a little bit more tricky. So let's take a look at this. Yeah, this is here. And again, and Rhina's great. And notice one of the things when you look at Rhina's poems is just how much enjambment she uses. And when there's a true hard stop at the end of a line with some kind of punctuation, it's, oops, this should be underlined. I mean, italicized. But when she has a hard stop, it really hits forcefully too, you know? Okay, so anyway, here's here. And this is a sonnet. So this is more like what we're going to be doing with the critique or the Rattlecast prompt poem this week. So here's this. Let's see. Everything here is unused but orderly. Okay? And then she starts out with a strong beat. The everything. Oop. Sorry, I messed up. This is everything here unused but orderly. Okay, so that's the breaks. And then you see this has 5 beats, and except for the first one, there's a very common thing to do to invert that first foot. And that really like sort of rushes out the start of a poem or a stanza. And we've seen Rhina do that in the last poem too. Everything here, unused but orderly, as if ready for use a mint or two, as if ready for use a mint or two. His nail clipper, the little scissors he. Or maybe actually, I guess the clipper gets a stress. I should have said that. His nail clipper, the little scissors he. Okay. Oh, well, this is just coming a mess. Trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do. This one's a really tricky line. Trimmed is definitely stressed, and then his is definitely not. His mustache with. So this is a really, so trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do. It's still 5 lines. Trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do. Sorry, I'm trying to get my hand in there. but it's definitely a lot of variation. So she set up the thing, and then she really mixed it up in this. Yeah, I'm just trying to read what some poems. Dick Westheimer says Tim's voicing of ready seems forced. Maybe you got to read it. Yeah. Maybe this is inverted too. You can see, sorry, this is turning into a mess of a paper. You can see how some things like the ready. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. I'm just trying to read the comments. Yeah. Yeah. If there are things like the ready, as if ready. Yeah, I think you're right. It's important to read them in a natural voice too. As if ready for use a mint or two. His nail clipper, the little scissors he trimmed his mustache. I don't know. So, then she also says trimmed his mustache. I don't know. I read it as, but this is the thing I wanted to point out and why I'm picking up this poem. Because I think there's a lot of different ways you could scan it. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, Chelsea is really good at this. I don't know if you're too busy, Chelsea, but I was wondering how you would scan this line. Trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do. That's how I scan it. Trimmed his mustache with. But you could also say trimmed his mustache with, but that doesn't sound normal. Trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do. Yeah. His watch, a neatly folded handkerchief. So we go back, after this really hard line, we go back to a really iambic line. Yeah. Okay, so Chelsea reads it as trimmed his, where I lost it. Trimmed his mustache with. So you do see the with. So Chelsea's got it like that. And then trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do. And that's the thing. So this is Rhina Espaillat. Yeah, Chelsea reads it as 6 feet. And you kind of like when it's a poet who knows is established, even just within the poem, that you know that they know what they're doing with meter. Yeah, because I naturally read it as that way too. But it makes me think she reads it this way. And I think what I wanted to highlight, like talking about this, is there is a lot of variety in how to read these, and how to hear the sound. And people will disagree. And that's actually really one of the fun things about poetry that we miss without having, formal poetry being a big part of literature, because you get to play with this, and it's really fun to break down and see how you do it and how you hear things a little bit differently. Yeah. Yeah. So trimmed his mustache with, but the with is so down. So I can like it. At first I read it like Chelsea did. Trimmed his mustache with, scribbled. But there's like this, I think it conveys a kind of sadness to go down to an unstress in the way you say it. And that's what the line wants you to do, to make it 5 feet. So that's why I think of it that way now. But it was only after thinking about it like this, if that makes sense. Anyway, the rest of the lines I think are, his watch. We already did this one. His watch, a neatly full, did handkerchief. So that's a very simple one. That spills a scattering of change, the pen, another very simple one. That leaked into his pocket now and then. That leaked into his pocket now and then. So we just go back after this. And to me, I think that's the beauty and the power of formal poetry, is that you have this like faltering at the spot where there's an emotional faltering. And I do really wonder if, I think it was Alfred Nickel who said that Rhina writes all the poems in her head and then writes them down. And it is where like the emotion, because this, and I happen to know, this is about her husband who just died. His name is Alfred too, actually a different Alfred than Alfred Nickel, who was on the show last night. And, and so getting to this spot where thinking like, these are the little scissors he trimmed his mustache with, that one like little detail that sort of breaks your heart in a poem. And that's where the meter isn't regular. And then it sort of composes itself again. It's like somebody like trying to hold back tears, it feels like to me. And that's exactly the spot where like it would happen. And then it sort of composes itself and goes back into the meter, into the more regular meter. I should read it regular first. I almost hear him now. Don't touch as if. I almost hear him now. Don't touch as if. I were pilfering his tangled hearing aids. And to me, let's see. Interesting. Mary Keating says, I was taught to put my head under my chin, and when my jaw dropped, that was the stressed syllable. Let's try it. I were pilfering his tangled hearing aids. You do open your mouth a little more because you're getting the sound out. I almost hear him now. Or no, I were pilfering. Or pilfering his tangled hearing aids. Yeah. Yeah. And Winston Munn says, I learned that the type of foot of a poem is determined by the majority of the lines. Yeah, exactly. You need enough to establish a pattern. And it takes a certain number. It takes a majority. I think it takes more than a majority, like a super majority or whatever, to establish the pattern and then break it sometimes. Let's see. I were pilfering. I read this as a stress. I were pilfering his tangled hearing aids. Is that 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then again, if I think about that at first, I wonder, I guess she must hear it like this, where this is an unstressed. Because I could hear it that way too. It's one of those where you can bend it either way. Don't touch, as if I were pilfering. And then this is that, what is the one where it's 2 unstressed and then a stress? Is that anapest? I were pilfering his hearing aids. Yeah. So that's a variation there. But you don't really, it sort of depends. There's so much gray area. But the thing that makes the gray areas work is that you have a majority, as Winston Munn just said, of poems or of feet that are the same. And then you sort of wiggle around and dance around within that sometimes. Let's see. The snarl of keys, his red Swiss Army knife. The snarl of keys, his red Swiss Army knife. That's a very straightforward one. Hiding, its tiny arsenal of blades. Its tiny arsenal of blades. Again, pretty standard, but the arsenal is a really quick one too. So even in that 5 IM beat, arsenal is a really quick word. Okay. Anyway. Arsenal of blades, like legs tucked under, glasses, wallet, wife. Like legs tucked under, glasses, wallet, wife. And so here with the commas, you have, with the commas, or the periods, I should say, you have these pauses that break up the iams and sort of switch around and invert them too. And that's a really fun thing that she plays with by having that unstressed end here. So there's a regular iam, like legs tucked und, but then glasses. And we have the pause here, which again is another variation that really slows down. And again, notice how where there's that sharp variation, it's one of the fine details that make you sort of tear up a little bit. And again, it's an important part to be breaking down in this emotional poem. Like legs tucked under, glasses, wallet, wife. And then that wife, of course, is one of the big emotional moments in the poem too. Each item's here, though useless as it is. Each item's here, though useless as it is. So that's a very simple one. I don't know why, except that it was his. Yeah. I don't know why, except that it was his. And again, just like the last poem, after this variation here, which was like an emotional jolt, she flows into the regular pattern again, so you feel like the completeness of it, really. Like we've gone on this sort of journey of the metrics and then come back and like sort of landed smoothly. And it gives a poem this feeling of completeness and surety, which is why you see it so often as like a move within formal poems. So it's a really wonderful one. And yeah. Let's see. Okay. So if anybody has any questions, let me know. Do you want to do, I don't know, it's already been 40 minutes or 35 minutes. I printed out the sound too, which is another one. There's some really interesting. I think it's my favorite sonnet. I love it. It's came out Inizio, the sound. I love, again, tons of enjambment, and there's a beautiful flow to this one. I've probably read it on the show before. I want to point out some cool moves that she does, though, so maybe I'll do this really quick. The sound. Mark says the suffering that we don't see. Here, I'll do this again. Ready? Mark says the suffering that we don't see still makes a sort of sound, a subtle, soft noise, nothing like the cries of screams that we might think of, more the slight scrape of a hat doffed by a quiet man, ignored as he stands back to let a lovely woman pass, her dress just brushing his coat, or else it's like a crack. Sorry, I keep moving. In an old foundation, slowly widening, the stress and slippage going on unnoticed by the family upstairs, the daughter leaving for a date, her mother's resigned sigh for a date. I'm not sure about this one. I'll have to read that later. When she sees her, it's like the heaving of a stone into a lake before it drops. It's shy, it's barely there, it never stops. Okay. And so there's some really cool moves here. So Mark says the suffering that we don't see. So again, we established the iambic right there. Still makes a sort of sound, a subtle, soft. So we just established that right there. Noise, nothing like the cries. Sorry, this is unstressed, of screams that we. So we add a little bit. One of those. I'm so bad with the terms. Is that an anapest, or is that a whatever it is? The unstressed, stress. So we add an extra syllable there, and it lines with here. So really, we have noise. We have two trochees, you could call it. Setting that up like that. If that makes sense. Yeah. Ace Boogie says, Mark says, thanks, Nancy. Anapest is the right word for that. So you could read it as that, as a headless line, and then an I am, and then an anapest, or you could read it like two trochees and three I ams. There's different ways you can do it, or see it, or hear it, I guess is the best way to call it. And, yeah. Yeah, so let me see how Chelsea does it. So she puts the emphasis. So Chelsea's got nothing. Yeah, I guess you're right. Noise, nothing like the cries. And then she does the anapest there. Nothing like. Oh, you stress the like. I don't know if I read it that way. Let me see. A subtle, soft noise, nothing like the cries of screams that we might think of. See, I don't read it with a stress on the like. A subtle, soft noise, nothing like the cries of screams that we. That's what I do. I think I did it wrong here, though. So I go, I'll do the other thing right here. I do a subtle, soft noise, nothing like the cries of screams that we. That's how I read it. You can see that's different. It's got this. Sorry, I should have put the stress there. You're right. So it's stress, unstress, and then I do that anapest. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a really interesting move, and it sort of swoops you in too. Again, when there's variation, it's a part that pulls you forward or does some function within the poem. And then this is a really interesting line too, where she rips off these core iams. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I'm still reading. Okay. So here, so that we might think of more the slight scrape of a hat doffed. And so I love these because you have more the slight scrape of a hat doffed. And that's how I read that. And that's two core iams in a row, which is where you have unstressed, stress, unstressed, stress. So it's like a doubling, like a squaring of the iam. and it ends up with 4 beats, but they're 4 beats arranged in an unusual way. And the language, our language is cool because it allows all these variations in how we speak. Yeah. And here, that we, and because we have the emphasis on we, might think of, and I put the stress here. So this is how I scan this. And again, this is one I wonder if Chelsea or others might scan this differently. That's how I scan it, is a whatever that one is called, the unstressed, stressed, unstressed, and then 2 core IMs. And it's still adding up to 5 stresses. And then she does another core IM, by a quiet man. Is how I read that. Ignored as he stands back. And after that whole riff of, and Mary Keating points that rhythm is mimicking the throwing a hat. Like, it's so, like, the body knows. I mean, that's the wonderful thing that I just love. It's like, I don't think Kim Adenizio thought, oh, he's throwing his hat, I want to be throwing the language. But that is, the feeling, like the body, when you're writing and composing and feeling the music of language, tells you to do that. It's really wonderful. So, yeah. So then and then, I don't know, but then again, there's so much variation in how you read and pronounce words. And I just think that throws people off a lot. And here, quiet, by a quiet man, even though that's a lot of, even quiet is like a 2 syllable. I think that's an elision or a blending where you feel the 2 syllables as one. Anyway, this is just a really interesting, if you like to scan poems, it's really interesting, but it's beautiful, and you can feel, no matter how, I feel the 5, even within this like massive variation, you still feel the 5 beats really clearly, Let me read this whole section again. Mark says, and maybe it is like this, maybe it's Mark says, and it's not that. Mark says the suffering that we don't see still makes a sort of sound, a subtle, soft noise. Nothing like the cries of screams that we might think of, or the slight scrape of a hat doffed by a quiet man, ignored as he stands back. Yeah. Anyway, we'll just read this poem and then we'll look at what people have sent in. To let a lovely one pass, or dress just brushing his coat, or else it's like a crack in an old foundation, slowly widening, the stress and slippage going on unnoticed by the family upstairs, the daughter leaving for a date, her mother's resigned sigh when she sees her. It's like the heaving of a stone into a lake before it drops. It's shy, it's barely there, it never stops. Anyway, let's take a look at what else we have. I'm going to hit refresh. I know Leslie Ann sent one, and we'll at least look at that. See if anybody did in the last couple minutes. Mary Keating and Nancy Till and Dick Westheimer. Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do. We'll start with Leslie Ann Skechterson. And I will switch to the old screen view. Or maybe I should... let's see. There's also this thing I can do. I have the web marker. Okay. Let's see. So here is Morning After the Snow Moon. And this is Leslie Ann Skechterson's poem. And I have this little, and Leslie Ann is from Washington. And of course you recognize her from Rattlecast prompt lines frequently, especially lately. Anyway, let's take a look at her poem. Morning After the Snow Moon. We'll read it and then we'll sort of scan some and talk about where it may be trippy. I think maybe that's the best way to do, is like try to smooth out things that don't sound right to our ears. Because we only have, I'll go a little over, but we don't have tons of time. Morning After the Snow Moon. I watched the morning wake this day with dew, as sunshine burns through fog that lifts and steams, awakening my heart to sing anew, to beat the words that danced in vivid dreams. A hummingbird lands high up on a bare, thin branch with buds awaiting springtime's warmth, disturbs a spider's web like thin white hair, and gentle breezes blowing back and forth. But soon the silence fades away like dust that floats through beams of light, then lost into a universe I cannot trust. The luminalities of lines crisscrossed. In Minneapolis last month, 2 deaths still haunt my sleep with screams and freeze my breaths. So I think that's an interesting, the structure is as far as the meter goes, is it establishes meter pretty well at the beginning, and then again comes in that same way Rhina's does, settling back into more consistency at the end, sort of completing that with a lot of variation in the middle of these lines. I can draw now of these lines. Let's see. I watch the morning wake this day with dew, very clearly 5, as sunshine burns through fog that lifts and steams. Again, very basic iambic all the way through. Awakening my heart to sing anew. Again, I would say that this part, just from a critiquing standpoint, I think this feels a little bit forced to make the rhyme. I think maybe work on that a little bit. The sing anew is a little bit, I don't know, like pat. But besides for that, but the meter's right. And the awakening is one of those like quicker things like Rhina had, I can't see it anymore, I don't know where, but you can kind of have a quicker word that still has the syllables in there sometimes. Anyway, to beat the words that danced in vivid dreams again. So the first 4 lines are pretty clearly iambic to my ear. And then a hummingbird lands high upon a bear. So this one I have trouble hearing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me see. So it's this line. A hummingbird, if you can see that. That's pretty clear. But then lands, I got to stress. Lands high up on a bear. That's kind of how I read it. A hummingbird lands high upon. No, I guess I do see I guess the problem is I have a thing there. A stress there on the on. A hummingbird lands high up. I'm having trouble scanning this line. A hummingbird lands high up on a bear. Maybe I don't. I don't know. Let's see. A hummingbird lands high up on a bare thin branch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. So this one feels, I think it's a little bit too off to me. It's hard for me to figure it out. Yeah. Ace Boogie points out too that upon should be what single word? Yeah. A hummingbird lands high. Upon. Do you really? It doesn't feel like you say it naturally like that. Let's see. Susan Spear says the bird syllable promotes to a secondary stress because it's the stress position. A hummingbird lands high upon a bare, thin branch. Yeah. A hummingbird. Yeah. So, wrong one. Over here. So they've got hummingbird lands high upon a bear. Yeah. I don't know. That one just feels a little unnatural to me, the high up on. It's personally, I would play with it, but maybe it's just me. A thin branch. A bare, thin branch with buds awaiting springtime's warmth. That's very, very straight iambic. Disturbs a spider's web. Disturbs a spider's web like thin white hair. Again, so that's very straight with a little bit of sort of temporal shifting. In gentle in gentle breezes. Like that. This is blowing back and forth. And there's a nice, the back and forth rhythm to it too. But soon the silence fades away like dust. And again, that's pretty good. But soon the silence fades away like dust that floats through beams of light. Then lost. To me, this only seems like 4 beats. This is where I was saying it sort of gets off. That floats through beams of light, then lost. So that's only 4 that I've got. So it feels like it's missing a foot in that line. Into a universe I cannot trust. Into a universe. So I would do it like that. I cannot trust. Well, it's getting so messy now with my notes, but into a universe I cannot trust. Into a universe I cannot trust. Okay, well that works. So really this one, it's just go back. Yeah, that floats through beams of light, then lost. It is 1 foot too few. That was the one that was off. The liminalities of lines crisscrossed. And this one has the crisscrossed, either it's too short. The much easier to do with an actual pen. The liminalities of lines crisscrossed. So that one's good too. In Minneapolis, this last month, 2 deaths. In Minneapolis, last month, 2 deaths. Still haunt my... And then the last line's good. So really this, this one line that's short, and I get confused on this one. But other people don't. Let's see. Okay. All right. Well, that's one. Let's look at another one. Thanks for sharing this. And oops. How do I do that? Okay. We don't want that music yet. Well, it's not time yet to end. Nobody wants it to end. Okay. Let's go next. And I got to sorry, I'm using like new technology I don't usually use for the critique of the week. I got to go back to my pointer in order to say to myself that we already looked at this one. And then there. And then we'll go to the next person who sent one. Winston Munn. Let me double check the second poem from Winston wasn't a sonnet. It was not. Okay. But we'll get to Winston soon. Don't worry. Then we had Dick. And Dick's got Silent Reminder. So let's take a look at Dick's. A silent reminder. My wife comes in the house and sighs. She's lost her phone in snow somewhere out on the trail, between the woods and here. She knows the cost. It's dollars, yes, but worse, her sense she's failed. The world, like so few things, it fit her hand. So small but strong. She opens all our jars. I grab my skis and go with her to scan the ground. We search till twilight, almost dark, but it's no use. The shadows and the snow conceal their secret well, but not the death a Cooper's hawk has left, a flicker's ghost, its blood and bone and matted yellow breast. We know... Sorry, where's my mouse? Sorry. There we go. We know a phone so easily replaced. Our skiing's shush, a small and quiet praise. Okay, so there's a lot of variation, I'd say, in this one. My wife comes in the house and sighs she's lost. So very straightforward there. Her phone in snow somewhere out on the trail. Her phone in snow somewhere out on the trail. Do you really... I don't know. Her phone in snow somewhere out on the trail is actually how I'd say it. But that works too. Her phone in snow somewhere out on the trail. That's how. So this is a little bit, to me, this is a little bit of an inversion, but not a bad one. It's a very functional one. I scanned this actually like her phone. No, this button, and then this button. Okay, okay, here we go. Her phone in snow somewhere out on the trail. That's how I scan it. So we have that one trochee in there, but still the 5 beats. So that works. Between the woods and here, she knows the cost. Very straightforward iambic. It's dollars, yes, but worse, her scent she's failed. And iambic there. So that's the only one with a variation. The world, like so few things, and this is where I started to feel the world is, obvious, very clearly normal. Like so few things, it fit her hand. The world, like so few things, like so. Because the problem is you can say things in that voice that where you sort of make it stress, but I don't really read it like that either. The world, like so few things. I stress the few things, and it's hard not to if you're reading it naturally. Like so few things, it fit her hand. So to me, this feels like too many stresses. And there's another one where I would love second opinions on it. But to me, this world, like so, if anybody, do you hear so few things? Does everybody hear it like that? Is that just me? So small but strong, she opens all our jars. That one's a good one. Or I shouldn't say good, just because it's a clean one. Let me see what the comments are. Yeah, so Chelsea does scan it as straight iambic, but to me, the few gets a stress when you say it naturally. The world, like so few things. But okay. I grab my skis and go with her to scan the ground. We search till twilight, almost dark. This one I felt a little off too, so let's see. The ground, we search till twilight, almost dark. I guess not. That's good. But it's no use. The shadows and the snow. Oops, I'm terrible with this. But it's no use. The shadows and see. I think this is why it's feeling off to me. There's a lot of stresses to me on things like the and that fit the meter but aren't, natural. So I would, saying this line naturally, I would say, but it's no use. The shadows and the snow. And this would be, and the snow. And that's why, this feels off to me. Let me see what comments are. Okay. But it's no use. And I might even do it. The shadows and the snow. It feels short to me because of that. Because the and doesn't really deserve a stress. Conceal their secrets well, but not the death. Conceal their secrets well, but not the death. That one is straight. A cooper's hawk has left a flicker's ghost. It's blood. I guess one thing. So we looked at the variation within. You could go back to, the sound, which has this huge riff here with the core iams and stuff. But the key really, and is it still you hear the 5 beats, and that's what makes it feel. Even no matter how much play and riffing around, that's what makes it feel metered. And I think where it felt off for me is because I only feel the 4 beats here. I think there was another line I only felt 4. And you saw with the last one, too, with Leslie Ann. There was one clear 4-beat line. So really, making sure you have 5 beats is the the primary thing to do. Okay, go back to this. Conceal their secrets well, but not the death. A Cooper's hawk has left, a flicker's ghost, its blood and bone and matted yellow breast. Yeah, so that's all clear. How do I... We know a phone so easily replaced. Our skiing shush, a small and quiet praise. Yeah, so that's very nice. Yeah. So I think I point out the two lines that feel a little bit off to me. Let's see. Okay. So Chelsea's talking about Timothy Steele's idea of modulation. And he would call it a stress, but probably a 1 on a scale of 1 to 4. That's an interesting way of thinking about it. And I guess, so the scale, the idea of a scale is really interesting in part of it too. There's a lot of gray area, a lot of ambiguity. Yeah. Yeah, the Steele's book, all the funs and how you say a thing. Yeah. Let's see, Janet Milton says, the sibilance in the poem works for me and makes me think of snow falling and smoothing over the sound of the phone. Yeah, very nice. Yeah. Anyway, let's take a look at another one before we go. Get rid of those. Mark this as looked at. Where'd the pointer go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Oop. And then we'll take a look at another one. Next up was, an error occurred. Hang on. We'll reload the page. Okay. Sometimes Submittable does that. This is Nancy Tennell. We'll take a look at Nancy's, and then that'll probably be it. So hers is, on being visited by a red army. Okay. On being visited by a red army. Well, 7 inches of snow quilted the ground. The stripped bare trees stood vigil over the land. Some branches leaning as if to offer a hand to brush the powder from bushes, now snow-capped mounds. The quiet prevailed and nothing made a sound until they arrived, their entrance both swift and grand. I fear they were starlings until they began to land. One faced my window, perched on a branch he had found, and puffed up his feathered breast as if wanting to speak. They were robins, 100 of them, mustering on my lawn, perhaps to perform a premature rites of spring. If this platoon of scouts has been well pleased, I anticipate nests with blue eggs and songs at dawn. I salute you, O sweet harbingers of the spring. Well, that is interesting one. That's Nancy Tennell's, and I counted extra beats in a lot of lines. To the point I was wondering, is there a lot of 6-beat lines? Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, looking at some comment. Chelsea McClellan says, this poem is a good example of using anapes frequently enough that we can tell without a doubt it's intentional. Yeah. Well, 7 inches of snow quilted the ground. Where'd my thing go? There we go. Okay. Well, 7 inches of snow quilted the ground. That's how I have it there. Well, 7 inches of snow quilted the ground. So we have a little bit of variation. One of those core iambs to me, and then the anapest, if I'm remembering the words right. The stripped bare trees, the stripped bare trees, the stripped bare trees stood vigil over the land. The stripped bare trees stood vigil over the land. This one's a hard one to scan, this second line. Yeah. Let's see. So Chelsea reads the first one like this. She says, while 7 inches of snow quilted the ground. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's how I scanned it too. Never mind. I thought that was different. But the second line is tricky for me. The stripped bare trees. And it's because that stripped bare trees. I'm not sure. That sort of breaks it. The stripped bare. Because you could say the stripped bare trees. But with the hyphen, it sort of reemphasizes the bare. And that throws me off a little bit. The stripped bare trees stood vigil over the land. I mean, you could read it like that. And then that would just be a straight iambic line. So I guess maybe it's one of those things where if the pattern is established really well, that feels right. Yeah. Yeah, Chelsea McClellan says, it's hard to scan a poem using this free of meter without seeing the poet's intention for me. Yeah, it definitely is. Because we see those variety in the Kim Ananizio poem, the variations in the two Rhina poems, where there were things that like that mustache line, where it reads as 6, but then it's Rhina, and so she sort of, I feel like it must be reading it, and then there's a way you read it as 5, and that's why establishing it really matters a lot. And so establishing what meter you're using and being consistent enough that it's like, yeah. Nancy Tennell says, the stripped bare trees stood vigil over the land. Yeah, the stripped bare trees. And then the stood is very strong too. Stood vigil over the land. Yeah. So a lot of ambiguities in that. The stripped bare trees stood. See that I want that stood to be emphasized too, but it doesn't have to be. Stood vigil over the land. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 there. Some branches leaning as if to offer a hand. I think this one was pretty clean. To brush the powder from bushes, now snow-capped mounds. To brush the powder from bushes. To brush the powder from bushes, now snow-capped mounds. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the trouble is that like there's a lot of variation and not it doesn't feel established enough, like rooted enough for the amount of variation. The quiet prevailed and nothing made a sound. The quiet prevailed and nothing made a sound. That's a pretty clear one. Until they arrived, their entrance both swift and grand. That's one that felt like 6 to me. Until they arrived, their entrance both swift and grand. I guess you could do it that way. Until they arrived. Until they arrived. And then we have that anapest. No, crap. Whatever the word is. Their entrance, both swift and grand. So we have these two variations in the middle. And yeah. I feared they were starlings until they began to land. I feared they were starlings. Yeah. 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 Okay. I feared they were starlings until they began to land. And I think maybe it's because because we have all this variation in the middles of lines. Yeah, exactly. So Chelsea just posted it. The were doesn't feel like. Yeah, I feared they were starlings until they began to land. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I guess that works. So I guess with this one, I would just say because there's so much variety, it's just not quite establishing that baseline of the I am for me. Because every line has variation pretty much, or multiple variations usually. One faced my window, perched on a branch he had found. One faced my window, perched on a branch he had found. Yeah. So that one's good. But it's just not establishing a specific foot, I guess, is what we're talking about. Yeah. I think we'll because we got to get moving on. I think that's the main takeaway of this. I think they're to make it feel, because it didn't read feeling strictly metrical. Like, it felt very, very loose, and that's because there's too much variation to establish the pattern that you're like pushing against. So I think, and I do love the anapests and the whatever the other word is that you're using. It'd be cool to use those feet enough that's the pattern. Anyway, let's take a look. Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. Let's take a look at one more before we go. And I gotta do this too, and this, and this. Sorry, it's hard with all. But okay, let's see what we have next. Oh, and here Mary Keating's got one. Okay, we got a photo too. A Teen's Hail Mary. We'll pull this over here and see what we've got. When my report card blows in by snail mail, my granny cops the letter from the box. Should I spill to her why I always fail, or just keep acting like a sneaky fox? I know when I hear that envelope rip, I'm fucked for sure, no matter what I choose. Mom and Dad enjoy their summer trip. Hang on. She better stay in her lane with bad news. Perhaps she'll be chill about how I've behaved like a teenager trying to be cool. But suddenly I'm woke that I've been saved as she delivers up the dope from school. Angel, tell me the grades for your classes. Seems I've misplaced those darn reading glasses. Yeah. Yeah, let's see. I'm just looking at the notes here. So Chelsea says, talking about the last one, I read it as accentual verse, counting the beats more than worried about consistent feet. Is that fair? And yeah, I mean, that's what I mean too. And I think there's nothing wrong with that too. Okay. Well, anyway. When my report card blows in by snail mail. Terry Miller says, summer school is usually for making up a failed year. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, when my report card blows in by snail mail. So we have a lot of stresses in this line, the way you'd naturally read it. When my report card blows in by snail mail, and definitely snail mail is stress. Let me here. When my report card blows in by snail mail. That's how I read that. So I've got one extra beat in that line. And because snail mail, it's really hard to read snail mail is not a spondy, like the two stresses in a row. My granny cops the letter from the box. My granny cops the letter from the box. And that one I read is 4. My granny cops the letter from the box, right? My granny cops the letter. Well, I guess you could say from the box. My granny cops the letter from the box. I guess that's the one, like with the and, it's a super, super weak on the scale, but it's in the right position. But given that I think with Rhina's poem, you accept that a lot more easily because the meter's established right away. You know, we not even just right away, but the meter's established. It's mostly that. And so it just feels natural to be in that rhythm. But because we had too many beats in the first line, that makes me skeptical. Because normally I would say from the box. You know, my granny cops the letter from the box. And that from the box would be an anapest. My granny cops the letter from the box. And that's how I naturally say it. And if you're like in a... Yeah. Let's see. Anyway, we'll keep going. Should I spill to her why I always fail? Should I spill to her why I always fail? And so there we start out with that anapest. Should I spill to her why I always fail? Yeah. And so really, because we haven't established it, as Chelsea says, the first line was too rough to scan. And then it just doesn't put you in the right mindset to be reading that way. And you sort of start reading it more as free verse. Yeah. So let's see this one. Should I spill to her why I always fail? Should I spill to her why I always fail? Yeah. This one's a little hard. You know, you could say, should I spill to her why I always... No, sorry. I'm really messing this drawing up. It's harder to do. But should I... So the should... It's just hard to see. Should I spill to her... Should I spill to her why I always fail? Comes up as 6 to me. And it's hard to annotate it, but it's another one. Susan Spears says 5-beat line. Should I spill to her why I always fail? And it's tricky for me to hear at this point. Or just keep acting like a sneaky fox. Well, that one's very clear. And the other thing, there has a... Let's see. Our vid notes says our sonnets with a regular meter that's not iambic pentameter are also acceptable. Well, yeah, you could have accentual verse sonnets. You can have, you can have syllabic sonnets. I think for the prompt though, it was a traditional sonnet, a Shakespearean, Spenserian, Miltonic, or which one am I thinking? Petrarchan. So one of those, and there. I think you want iambic pentameter. Let's see. Chelsea says for this, I read it as, should I spill to her why I always fail. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, the other thing I wanted to point out is it feels sort of because it has this like a regular pattern to the structure of the poem. It has a sort of limerick type quality where you're expecting like a punchline. There's like a setup and punchline feel to the stanzas, or maybe the couplets. When my report card blows in by snail mail, my granny cops the letter from the box. Should I spill to her why I always fail, or just keep acting like a sneaky fox? I know when I hear that envelope rip, I'm fucked for sure no matter what I choose. While mom and dad enjoy the summer trip, she'd better stay in her lane with bad news. And do you feel how the repetition of that, because we don't have any real enjambment, and we have the stanzas perfectly paralleled with like a setup and a conclusion, like a hypothesis and a thesis, or whatever you call it, or antithesis, or whatever. You know, there's that setup punchline feel. It starts to feel like that. You expect the rhyme, and there's not enough like play in there to spark. You want to have more enjambment and less of a consistent structure. You know, let yourself play a little bit more with line length, like real regularity to the lines. When you have, there's a period or a question mark at the end of every other line. So here, there, and that makes for so it's exactly the 10 feet for every sentence. So there's no natural there's no natural variation in the sentence structure, which is one of the great things about poetry you want to take advantage of, or just writing, is having a lot of variety in the lengths of your sentences, because that changes your emphasis. And yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Dick Westheimer says, so I'm wondering, folks with a better ear miss some enjoyment of poems when they hear clanking, where many folks miss it and can access the poem without distraction. Chelsea McClellan, what do you think? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, to me, there's a music to every poem, and you're listening for the music and to find like what the music is. And yeah. So you're listening for what the music is, and it doesn't matter if it's formal verse or not. Like, there's still a way that the voice is playing within the music of the poem. And an off note is an off note whether or not it's in a traditional poem or not. Like, you see me talk about how in regular free verse poems, there's like, there'll be a line, and it's like, we need another dot, dot, dot. Like, there's something else there that's like right at the end of that line that just didn't appear. And you can feel it. It's like part of the music. It's part of like there's some kind of way that a poem spirals out of like a single nugget, like the Big Bang. And then there's like the laws of the universe happen, and then matter attracts the way it will in the language of the poem. And you hear that, and you hear it off, whether or not it's a traditionally metered poem or not. That's my experience of it. So I think it's just the same. And maybe there's much more leeway. It's like someone soloing in, jazz or something, but there's still like the appropriate notes that you could play that fit the melody or the riff or whatever you'd call it, the measure. And there's notes that aren't appropriate to that, and off feels off. And it doesn't matter if it's traditional verse or not, in my opinion. Anyway, that was a longer critique of the week. Hope it was helpful. It's something I like but don't do very often, and probably should do more of, so I learn all the words and get better at scanning things. But hopefully it was still useful, and hopefully we all learned along the way in the process. Thanks, Chelsea, for all your contributions, everybody else too. So that's it. It's going to wrap up the show for this week, the critique of the week. Now, coming up on the Rattlecast, this week's guest is going to be Luisa Meridian. Luisa is one of the Rattle Poetry Prize finalists. Really entertaining, wonderful poet. Her book is I Make Jokes When I'm Devastated. She's me sharing mostly poems from them, a couple others too, I believe. Really great poet, also a great friend of Julia Kolchinsky. They wrote a book together, the past twice appearing Rattlecast guest. And once again, your prompt for this week is to write a traditional sonnet in one of the forms, either a Petrarchan, Shakespearean, Spenserian, or Miltonic sonnet. So those are the schemes you have to work with. Thanks everybody again for being here and participating. It's a lot of fun for me. We'll see you on Sunday night. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.